Right now, you are the only human species on Earth. No competition, no cousins, nobody else even close. In 300,000 years of Homo sapiens, that has almost never been true. For most of your species' existence, there were other kinds of humans walking around at the same time. Sometimes 5 or 6 of them, on different continents, sometimes in the same valley you'd be standing in. And then, one by one, every single one of them disappeared, except you. So what actually happened to the others? The answer isn't just stranger than you think. It's still inside you. Start with the one you've probably heard of, the Neanderthals. For decades, they were the punchline. The dumb, hunched, grunting cavemen who couldn't keep up. That version is wrong, and scientists have known it's wrong for a while. Neanderthal brains were slightly larger than yours. They made tools, controlled fire, wore clothing, treated their wounded. In a cave in Iraq called Shanidar, researchers found a Neanderthal skeleton. An older man, blind in one eye, missing an arm, cared for by his group for years before he died. That's not survival of the fittest. That's compassion. In a cave in France, archaeologists found a Neanderthal-built structure made from broken stalagmites arranged in a circle, deep underground, far past any daylight, for a purpose nobody can explain. These weren't lesser humans. They were just different. And you're about to find out how different. For tens of thousands of years, Neanderthals and your ancestors lived side by side across Europe and the Middle East. Then, around 40,000 years ago, they vanished. Every single one. Scientists have spent a century arguing about why, and here's what should bother you. None of the leading answers involve a war you'd recognize. One theory is climate. Europe was swinging through brutal cold snaps, and Neanderthal bodies, built for raw power and short bursts of hunting, needed enormous amounts of food just to function. When the megafauna they depended on thinned out, that math stopped working. Another is disease, the kind that spreads the moment two long isolated populations start touching the same water, the same meat, the same air. But the theory that should actually unsettle you is numbers. Recent estimates suggest your ancestors outnumbered Neanderthals something like 10 to 1 in the regions where they overlapped. You don't need a massacre to erase a species. You just need to outcompete them for the same food, the same caves, the same rivers, generation after generation until the math runs out. But here's the part that changes everything you just heard. Neanderthals didn't actually go extinct, not completely. In 2010, scientists sequenced the Neanderthal genome and compared it to yours, and what they found rewrote the textbooks. If your ancestry traces outside sub-Saharan Africa, somewhere between 1 and 4% of your own DNA is Neanderthal, right now in every cell in your body. Not symbolic, literal. Genes that shape your immune system, your skin, even whether you're a morning person, some of that is them, still running. You didn't just outlast Neanderthals. You absorbed them, and they weren't the only ones. In 2008, in a Siberian cave called Denisova, researchers found a tiny finger bone, just a fragment. The DNA inside didn't match Neanderthals, and it didn't match you. It belonged to a species nobody had ever identified, one we still don't have a full skeleton for. We called them Denisovans, and almost everything we know about them lives in DNA, not bone. Tibetans today carry a Denisovan gene that lets them survive at altitudes where oxygen is thin enough to kill most people. Populations in Papua New Guinea carry up to 6% Denisovan DNA. An entire human species you can't even picture is still quietly operating inside millions of people breathing right now. It gets stranger. On the island of Flores in Indonesia, researchers found humans who stood about 3.5 feet tall, brains roughly the size of a chimpanzee's. Homo floresiensis. The internet nicknamed them hobbits. And here's what shouldn't be possible. These tiny humans were making stone tools and hunting animals many times their size, and the newest estimates put their extinction at around 50,000 years ago, which means they may have still been alive when your species walked into their world. Local legend on Flores still describes small, hairy forest people called the Abu Gogo. Nobody's calling that proof, but it's the kind of detail that makes you wonder how much folklore is memory wearing a costume. Then, almost unbelievably, a fourth. In 2013, cavers in South Africa squeezed through a chamber so narrow only the smallest researchers could reach it. Inside were the remains of at least 15 individuals of a species nobody had ever seen. Homo naledi. Small brain, primitive climbing shoulders, but hands and feet startlingly close to yours. That chamber is nearly impossible to reach by accident. Some researchers believe naledi deliberately placed their dead there, which would mean a species with a brain a third the size of yours may have practiced something like ritual burial before you existed. If that's true, you don't even own the idea of honoring the dead. You just think your species invented it. And that's still not the full list. Homo erectus survived almost 2 million years, longer than any human species on record, spreading from Africa to Asia and holding on until roughly 100,000 years ago on Java, meaning it too may have overlapped with you. In 2019, researchers on the Philippine island of Luzon announced Homo luzonensis, an entirely new branch on the family tree, known from little more than a handful of teeth and finger bones. Every few years on some remote island or forgotten cave, someone digs up a species we didn't even know existed, which leaves an uncomfortable question hanging over all of this. How many more are still buried out there, waiting for you to find them? So here's the real question, the one nobody fully answers. Why you? Why did your species walk out of Africa and end up the only one left, when Neanderthals were stronger, Denisovans were tougher, and others had been surviving on this planet for far longer than you had? The leading answer isn't strength. It's not even intelligence, not exactly. It's networks. Even in the deep past, your ancestors kept contact with groups hundreds of miles away, trading materials, sharing techniques, exchanging people through marriage. Neanderthal groups were smaller, more isolated. Close relatives clustered together generation after generation. When a Neanderthal band hit a bad year, there was no wider net to catch them. When your ancestors hit a bad year, there might have been. A species that can call on 100 distant strangers will always outlast one that can only call on family. Which brings you back to right now. You're sitting here alone, in a species that used to have company. For most of human history, being human didn't mean being unique. It meant sharing the planet with other minds, other hands, other grief. You didn't outsmart them in one dramatic victory. You outlasted them, and along the way, you absorbed pieces of almost everyone you met. That ache you can't quite name, the one that makes you search for other minds, in the stars, in the ocean, in AI, might not be new. It might be the oldest feeling you have. Your species spent 300,000 years never being alone, and right now, walking around inside you is a little bit of them, still waiting, quietly, to find out if you'll be the last ones too.